Who the hell can wait till morning? Talk now at latenightsportsradio.com.
Breaking news. A massive crowd disturbance at Old Navy. According to eyewitnesses, it's an enormous sale on jeans. Let's go to Sue on the scene. Sue? Oh, I'm just getting word. Sue has left the crew to shop. Let's go to Ted for traffic. Ted? Oh, Ted too?
Run to Old Navy right now. All jeans are on sale at the season's lowest prices, up to 50% off from just $15 for adults, $8 for kids. Plus, right now, kids' back-to-school styles are up to 60% off. Hurry in. Valid 8/13 through 8/26. Select styles only for kids.
Deborah Harry has become the first one to solo album.
My baby has problems. I think it's quite unique. She pays lots of money, not brushing all her feet. But I never buy her makeup or lipstick that is red. She looks so good without it. Plus my baby's got no hair. Got no head. No head. 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 We go out to the movies to have a real good time. And everybody stares because her body looks so fine. They give me dirty looks as if my baby cold and dead. I tell them that she's full of life. Just ain't got no hair. Got no hair.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this extremely special episode of the Mad Scientist Sports Lab. My name is Nick Ficcarelli. I am the Mad Scientist of Sports. The beacons are lit, the experiments are on the chalkboard, and ladies and gentlemen, I just don't have test subjects tonight. No. I have experts. I have experts that are the best of their craft. What craft, you may ask? It just happens to be fantasy football. But here's the kicker, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight is just not any fantasy football experts. It's the ladies of fantasy football. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. It's the annual special that the Mad Scientist Sports Lab has every year where the best ladies of fantasy football come right here on this very show, on this very network, to give the expert opinion that they are so well at doing. And I'm talking experts from ESPN, FanDuel, DraftKings, Blindside Football, Yahoo, you name it, they've done it. And let me tell you something, they will put anybody, and I mean anybody, to shame when it comes to fantasy football. But before I go ahead and introduce my first two guests, of course, I would be remiss in not introducing the apprentice who happens to be here with me tonight, as always. He did a very good job subbing for the Mad Scientist last week. I'm glad the lab is still intact, somewhat. But you affectionately also know him as Stat Boy. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Andrew Lukoff is in the house.
Nick, it's great to be back. The laboratory is back in one piece. I had to pay a lot of people off to keep a lot of hush-hush going on, if you get my drift.
Oh, I get your drift. But let's not be remiss in saying thank you so much for joining me this evening, as always, Drew. Last week you did a very, very awesome job holding down the lab for me. I'm glad to be back, and let's get things rolling right off the bat, because we have our first two experts here live on the Inscriber Radio Network, the Ladies of Fantasy Football Special. And what better way to get it kicked off by first introducing someone who's been on this show many, many times. She has a segment every week called Allie's Fantasy Alley right here every week at 10 p.m. And as always, I got to have her as one of the, and I mean the Ladies of Fantasy Football, Ms. Allie Santana. How you doing, Allie?
Hey, Nick, how are you? Hello, Mr. Apprentice. Nice to meet you.
Hello.
Virtually. Yeah, this is my 7th season, so I guess I'm sort of an old-timer among the ladies, I guess. Now we have so many more of us in the business, which is awesome.
Yeah, and joining us also tonight, I'm a big fan of hers. She was on my show last year. Obviously, I had to have her back, but now it seems like she's gotten a little bit bigger and better than ever because you can read her stuff live on ESPN.com. And when it comes to talking fantasy sports, whether it be football or whatever, she's absolutely top of the game. Ladies and gentlemen, joining us this evening, second year in a row on the Ladies of Fantasy Football, I give you Renee Miller. Renee, how you doing tonight?
Great, Nick. How are you? It's great to be back. Thank you for having me.
Hey, no problem. So let's get things started out. For this segment, we're going to be talking quarterbacks. And obviously the big news this week would be Cam Newton, since he happened to lose Kelvin Benjamin for the whole season due to a torn ACL. Lord, how sometimes I hate how long the preseason goes for the NFL, but I guess that's just the nature of the beast. I just wanted to ask you, ladies, and I'll start with you, Renee. How much will the injury to Kelvin Benjamin hurt Cam Newton's stats, and does that cause his ADP to go down a little bit?
I'm sure it will cause his ADP to go down a little bit, and I think it's a big loss. Kelvin Benjamin was more than we thought he'd be last year. Which, granted, expectations were low last year, but I think it's a pretty big loss. There's not a lot else going on there. I think it probably raises Greg Olson's stock the most. A lot of people are talking about Funchess, but it makes me like Greg Olson a bit more.
Okay.
Hello?
And Allie, what do you say about this injury to Kelvin Benjamin, and how does it impact Cam Newton?
Well, I think it's really there isn't a very positive way to spin Benjamin's loss. Benjamin was kind of inefficient last season and did a lot of work in garbage time, but he actually was responsible for more than 46% of the PPR fantasy points that Carolina wide receivers put up last year. And although I'm sort of into, honey bunches of Funchess as much as you can, be a rookie wide receiver kind of coming into the year with an opportunity, I think there's still a learning curve there, and we'll have to see what he's able to do on the field. I think there's a danger that he could be overdrafted, but I do like him as, a wide receiver 4 if you could get him in the middle rounds. The other thing that we have to be concerned about with Cam is that he didn't run very much last year. So that's kind of always what gave him a bit of a boost in his, ranking and his desirability as your fantasy starter. So for me, unless we see him run more, I do think it downgrades him. I moved him down. I think he's kind of, a QB 11 or 12 right now until we see things shake out. I just looked at his ADP, and he was kind of, a mid-7th round guy on July 24th, and he's dipped now into the late 8th, and that's, in the few days since Kelvin's injury. So.
Well, the other big news this week for obviously is Robert Griffin III. He took an absolute gigantic beating. I mean, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. But it also seemed that, after his now, very well-known quote that he's the best quarterback in the NFL, that he suffered not only just a concussion, but a couple of stingers as well. I think the blame goes two ways on this. One, you saw some of his play. He would run right into the line, right into the defensive, into the coverage, and would eschew the dump off when someone was open to get a couple of yards. And the other thing is that the offensive line was just a goddamn freak show of total complete. I can't even have the words for it because I've never seen my Pop Warner team could probably block better than the Washington Redskins line right now. I just wanted to, after watching this performance, and Renee, I'll start with you again. After watching this performance, is it safe to say that Robert Griffin is a quarterback that everybody needs to stay away from? Because either A, he's going to get hurt and he's going to be out this season, or B, he's going to lose his job right quick.
Yeah, well, I think what was coming through my mind as we're talking about both of these quarterbacks is that I wasn't interested in owning either one of them this year because I don't want a quarterback on a bad team, and I think these are both headed in that direction. Both the Panthers and the Redskins are not going to be good teams, and it really, I mean, analysis shows that it pays off to have a quarterback that's on a good team, that's going to win games, that's going to score a lot of points. Quarterback fantasy scoring is well correlated with team wins. So I'm not interested in either of these guys, pretty much no matter what, or too many pieces of their offenses. So everything you said is absolutely true about RG3. I mean, it's a shame. He's got some of the raw skills and, exciting ability that you want to see in a young quarterback, but he can't put it all together, and his team can't put it all together for him.
And I'm glad you said that because, 2 years ago when he was a rookie, I drafted him for my team, and he had an amazing rookie season. And then, of course, he had the injury, the knee injury, and then got hurt again in the playoffs. And then in the last couple of years, it seems like that he's regressed so much that, the old adage is, if you don't get it after 3 years, you're never going to get it at all. And it seems to me that he's stuck in such a rut. And Allie, I want you to pick up on this. He's stuck in a rut that I don't think that he will ever get the overall nuances of being an NFL quarterback, which also hinders his numbers as a fantasy quarterback towards the end of the day.
Well, I mean, there was some buzz going around this week that, he was ruined by the franchise, et cetera, with some poor decision-making early on about, keeping him in that game when he was clearly injured. And, I do think that he hasn't always shown to be the most coachable guy. But at the same time, it's hard to write somebody off. This is his fourth season. Wasn't planning on drafting him at all. I think obviously if you're a serious fantasy player and you play in a lot of leagues and you play in leagues where, let's say even their best ball leagues and you have a big roster, you might draft him as kind of at the very end of the draft, but he's really kind of fallen off the fantasy radar anyway. He does have availability issues, and it's a shame because he has some nice weapons around him, but it's just like a really bad vibe, and maybe change of scenery could do him some good if that materializes, but, he's definitely a guy that I would stay away from, and it remains to be seen whether it'll be McCoy or Cousins, or we could see, a quarterback by committee situation in Washington. So it's definitely no one that you're looking to draft as even a backup at this point. He's not even on Fantasy Football Calculator. He doesn't even register in the ADP they show. So he's really not being drafted in many leagues.
And now I shall pass this off to the esteemed apprentice, Andrew Gould.
The esteemed apprentice. And the game, I'm looking at a game going on right now. It's just about done. The Philadelphia-Baltimore game. And I know we don't want to overvalue preseason, but there is good reason to pay attention to this. And, Allie, I want to start with you on this one. Obviously, the two quarterbacks in here, you got Sam Bradford playing for a new team in Philadelphia, and Joe Flacco, who actually just looked horrendous. I'm beyond horrendous in this game. And Bradford looked fine. He didn't play that much. He looked fine. How do you see Sam Bradford adapting to this Philadelphia offense, and is he worth the gamble of drafting?
Yeah, I mean, obviously you're kind of rolling the dice if you draft him as your quarterback one, but I sure do like him as a QB2 with upside. He has availability issues, obviously, at 2 seasons in a row where he tore his ACL. So there's always that question mark of whether or not he'll, make it through the preseason, let alone, the season. But I do think that he's a good fit for the Chip Kelly offense. The Eagles ran the most plays in the NFL. They averaged, 70.4 a game. And in his last year in college, he averaged like 82 plays a game. So he can sort of play in a fast-paced offense. He has great weapons around him. I do like they're running a spread offense, build on a run game. The offensive line is good, not great. But I do think they're a team that's primed to score points. So, like I said, I wouldn't hesitate to draft Bradford as, a QB2, particularly if I had, a solid guy in front of him. But you can't draft him on his own. You're playing with fire.
Renee, what say you about the prospect of Sam Bradford? Is he worth the risk?
I almost couldn't agree with Allie anymore. Everything she said, I'm fully on board with. I'm excited to see how he does there, but I'm not willing to, like she said, make him my primary quarterback option for my fantasy team. In a 2-quarterback league, I like it, or as a backup with upside in a standard redraft. I think it could be really exciting. I think this change of scenery could be just what he needed, and there are a lot of exciting weapons there. Jordan Matthews, in particular, Nelson Aguilar, could make it really fun for him. And if he can stay healthy, they could, I think, do big things.
Now, I got a question for both of you again, and I'm going to start with Renee on this one. This is something that Nick and I have argued from time immemorial. Switching to the other side of the football in this particular game, Joe Flacco. We've seen some of the good he's done. We've seen some of the bad he's done, and we've seen the countless times his receivers have bailed him out of a jam. Look beyond horrendous in this preseason game. There's bad, and then there's Joe Flacco. 3 for 7, 23 yards, and 2 interceptions. I mean, Josh McCown blushed at that one. Is this a red herring, or is maybe this something to keep an eye on when it's coming to the fantasy draft? I mean, my 2 drafts are right before the season starts, that first week of September, but others are drafting earlier. Is this a red herring or something to be worried about? And Renee, I wanted to start with you on this one.
Well, I have to start by saying I don't know if you're aware of the Scott Fish Bowl, the 360-team mega fantasy league. I participated in that this year for the first time. There was a little interview process where they said, "What in one phrase, sum up your fantasy football motto or persona." And I said, "My fantasy football motto is I hate Joe Flacco." Basically, that sums up my whole philosophy about fantasy football. That said, I don't put that much stock in a bad preseason game from someone like Joe Flacco. I mean, he's as boring as they come, but he's the starting quarterback for the Ravens. They're going to be probably an above-average team. Yes, there's some questions about weapons, the age of Steve Smith, the readiness of Perriman, et cetera. But he's Joe Flacco. He's going to get the job done adequately most weeks. So I don't think that, this preseason experience is any indicator of how his season's going to go. I still don't want him on my team. I don't like Joe Flacco.
Well, so as a follow-up, you're saying Joe Flacco is not elite.
I'm saying not elite.
Get that, Nick? Get that?
You had to go.
I'm supported your side.
You just had to dig that in there, don't you?
Oh, you know it.
Every chance I get. I work that into most of my articles, actually.
Well, now you're my favorite because I can't stand Joe Flacco. He not only is he boring, but he plays for Baltimore. And as someone who's born and raised in Cleveland, I want Baltimore's football team to burn.
Yeah. Wow. You have
but
excellent.
that's my fandom coming out a little bit. Allie, let's say I want to give you the same opportunity, and you are more than welcome to say I hate Joe Flacco as well, and I will give you all the floor on that one. But really, is this a red herring, or is this something to actually be a little concerned about, considering how bad he actually did?
Well, again, I think Renee said it already. I don't ever make a snap judgment based on a crappy preseason game. He doesn't have Perriman out there. He's dealing, his sort of long guy, his deep guy, Torrey Smith, is gone. Steve Smith is, on the twilight of his career, and he's breaking in new players. I mean, the rookie Max Williams, Pitt is sidelined. So there are a lot of factors. I think on the positive, at least what I will be watching, is that, they have Mark Trestman there, and it'll be interesting to see from a fantasy perspective if any juice comes into that offense with Trestman there. He's not a guy that I would draft again. Sometimes when you play in 2 quarterback leagues, you're kind of forced to take him. But he usually puts up serviceable numbers every year. And the Ravens did address through the draft some replacement players. I heard Greg Cosell talking about Perriman and just how his skill set is like the cornerbacks even on the Ravens have said, just how talented and amazing he is, and he's just going to be very uncatchable once he gets back on the field. So I hope that's sooner rather than later. So I don't think Flacco gives fantasy owners, a lot of upside until we see what he does with his new weapons. But I think as a streaming quarterback during bye weeks or a daily fantasy with a particular matchup, you don't write him off.
Yeah, I as someone who went to the same school as Rashad Perriman, all this stuff you say surprises me not in the slightest. We knew what treasure we had down at UCF. As much as I can't stand Baltimore having, I'm glad the NFL is getting to see what he's what kind of skills he brings. But let me bring it back to actually the topic at hand. My fantasy team died last year after a horrible 6th week when Carson Palmer decided to give up and as in his body giving up and out for injury. His stats were outstanding, though. I mean, 11 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. He was one of the top quarterbacks in fantasy points at the time. Do you see, and I'll start with Allie this time just to switch back forth, do you see a potential repeat out of Carson, or does he get a little long in the tooth as far as his ability to produce as a QB1?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't draft him as a QB1 in a 12-team league, but, I do think they've made some upgrades in their O-line that are great for a relatively immobile quarterback like Palmer, especially coming off his ACL injury. He was very effective for fantasy, as you said, when he played last year. He put up at least 20 points in every game that he finished. So I think there's a lot of promise there as long as he's on the field. We need to think about, when you draft Palmer and you start Palmer, you expect some highs and some occasional, erraticism and some lows. But he sure isn't afraid to throw the ball. I'm very excited to see if, John Brown takes the leap this year. It's unfortunate that Michael Floyd's sidelined right now, but it doesn't seem like, he's going to be out for an extended period of time. Although Larry Fitzgerald's slowing down, I think he still puts up a solid kind of possession receiver. So And I think they do have the building blocks of a good run game with Andre Ellington. Hopefully David Johnson gets healthy. And I'm not counting on Chris Johnson for fantasy, but, hopefully he has something left in the tank and some motivation that, he can contribute as well.
Fair enough. Renee, what do you think about the prospects of Carson Palmer?
Yeah, I like Carson Palmer a lot this year. I do play in a pretty serious 2-quarterback league. My home league is a 2-quarterback league, my most competitive, people I most want to beat league. And he's definitely someone that I'm going to try to get as my second quarterback in that league. Just for that reason, he is healthy this year, and of course that can go south at any time. But I like his prospects in Arizona for all the reasons that Allie just said. I think they're poised to have a pretty balanced passing and running offense, and that I think that benefits Carson Palmer. And he might not have 400 yards passing every week, but I think he can be a very stable presence in your fantasy lineup. A couple touchdowns, 280 to 320 yards is, would be a dream as a QB2 in a 2-quarterback league.
I actually drafted him as a QB2 because Nick Foles came down to earth, and that's really kind of who I got stuck with more than anything else. Became my QB1 real quick. But I have a couple more quick ones before I let you ladies go off the old dusty trail. And give you back to Nick. Very quick one. Over under. Alex Smith will throw 5 touchdown passes to wide receivers. Allie, go.
Over. I'm going to say over.
All right, Renee, go.
Over.
Over 5. And this is a 5 touchdown improvement. We're going big here.
Touchdown improvement to wide receivers. Yep.
I was stunned when he had none for the entire season. I was absolutely stunned.
I know.
Lastly, and you've probably heard this question countless times, and this will be the last one before I pass off to Nick. Wink, wink. Tony Romo. How will he had the highest QB rating in the National Football League last year? Had an outstanding season, 3,700 yards, 34 touchdowns, and interceptions. A great QB1 for any fantasy league. How will the losses to Marco Murray impact the stats of Tony Romo? Renee, I'll start with you.
I'm not. I think that the run game is going to continue to be strong, just because of they don't want, I think, it to all fall on Romo's shoulders, and they have such a talented offensive line that whether it's Randall, and I think it can be, at least will be to start the season. I think they're going to want to maintain a healthy run game, and I think that's fantastic for Romo in the passing offense. I love him this year. I love Des Bryant this year. I want a lot of pieces of the Dallas offense on my fantasy team, both sides of the ball.
All right, Allie, what say you?
Okay, well, I'm not as enamored with the Dallas run game. I think we'll kind of see whether, does an offensive line make a runner, or does a runner make an offensive line or take advantage of that. So we'll see what happens, how that shakes out in Dallas with Randall, McFadden, and Lance Dunbar. But, I do think if you're holding off on a quarterback and, after the 7th or 8th round, Tony Romo is, a solid performer year in and year out. I used a lot of him last year. I do think that he has, weapons like, obviously, Dez. Cole Beasley's kind of interesting to me as sort of if you're in the back end of your draft or in a deeper league where your bench is larger. He could be kind of an interesting PPR guy. I want to see if Terrence Williams can do more with than score touchdowns, because he was kind of a feast or famine player. And certainly if that run game stalls, then I do think we see Romo and company throwing more. And also I expect to see Jason Witten more involved this year. I like kind of upside young talent kind of guys on the rise, but I'm really targeting some value veterans this year in drafts, and I think Witten is the kind of guy that's sort of your stable tight end if you want to draft another one that's kind of a high upside, but somebody who's failed to deliver on his promise. So I do like Romo this year.
All right, Nick, back to you. That was great.
Well, I just have one more question, and that is this. A lot of people are saying stay away from Peyton Manning this year. I will never stay away from Peyton Manning because a bad year for Peyton Manning would be 30 to 35 touchdowns and about 4,500 yards. To those people, Renee, I'll start with you. Those people that are saying stay away from Peyton Manning, should they get their heads checked or no?
I mean, fantasy football should be fun, so if you don't think you can have fun scoring points with Peyton Manning, then stay away from him. But I like points in fantasy football, so I'm not staying away from Peyton Manning. I don't think, I mean, a lot of people saw him kind of wear down toward the end of last year, and I don't think any of us know whether that's going to be a repeatable phenomenon or not. He is getting older. He has played in the league for a long time, but he's an incredibly successful competitor in an amazing situation in Denver. I love him, sure. I think those people might make a mistake if they want to avoid him intentionally.
And Allie, very quickly, yay or nay on Peyton Manning?
Not stay away, but I do think he's overvalued as the third quarterback off the board at 4-12. I would prefer to wait and get Ben Roethlisberger a round or two later, Drew Brees even, or better yet, wait and get, Stafford or Tannehill or somebody else later in the draft, especially in competitive leagues where a lot of these sort of, hot fantasy plays in the skill positions are going off the board very quickly.
Well, ladies, thank you so much for joining us tonight and talking quarterbacks right here on the Ladies of Fantasy Football Special. Renee, why don't you let the good people know where they can find you and the good stuff that you're doing at ESPN?
I'm writing, most of my content is geared toward daily fantasy football this fall. I'll be writing 2 articles a week at ESPN. I'm doing a new video/audio podcast for Pro Football Focus and writing an article for them as well. And I'll have weekly picks articles on RotoWorld.
Awesome. And Allie, obviously, yeah. Allie, obviously, people know where they can find you, but just in case, go ahead and let them know.
Well, I'm on Twitter at Allie Fontana. I'll be contributing to the Fantasy Fix, the Inscriber, and a few other sites, and I have some regular weekly podcast segments that I do, including one with you. So I look forward to chatting with you again.
Awesome. Thank you, ladies, so much for joining us this evening. Can't wait to read and listen to you guys for this season. Who knows? Maybe you'll be stepping back into the lab probably in a few weeks. But thank you so much. Have a good night.
Thank you. You too. Bye, Allie.
Have a great night.
And that was Allie Fontana and Renee Miller. And that's just getting started, ladies and gentlemen, because right now we're going to be talking running backs. And who better to come talk running backs than this lovely lady from the great state of Nevada who happens to be very well known in the FanDuel circles. And she is part of one of the most amazing teams of writers that have been put together for FanDuel. And to get her on the show tonight is an absolute honor. Ladies and gentlemen, joining us to talk some running backs here on the Ladies of Fantasy Football Special, none other than the lovely and talented Jessica Kleinschmidt. Jessica, how you doing tonight?
I'm good. How are you guys doing? Thank you so much for inviting me, too. I saw the lineup, and I felt like I'm in a lineup of royalty. Like, you had Renee Miller and Allie Fontana and Liz. Like, I'm just like, wow. Like, it's like celebrity status here, and y'all wanted me on here. So it's kind of an honor, so I really appreciate it.
Well, considering the
That's
fact...
how we roll.
Considering the fact of, like I said earlier, though, that the team that you're riding with right now at FanDuel with Michael Shoddy, Joe Pisapia, Brandon Marianne Lee, and the whole lot of them, you're part of that royalty now, young lady, whether you want to believe it or not. I mean, that's just like the cream of the crop right there, and you happen to be one of it. Wanted to bring you on the show, obviously, to talk running backs. And the first question I got for you is this. One of the big things during the offseason was Adrian Peterson coming back for the Minnesota Vikings. You know, a lot of people are taking into account that he did not play last year. He's got fresh legs. Other people are also saying, look at what happened a couple of years ago after he came back from the ACL injury, almost broke Barry Sanders' record. A lot of people have him as a top 3 running back this season. Just wanted to know where you would place him and what numbers do you see him going for this season?
Well, I mean, one of the biggest questions, like you did say, going into the season was if he was going to be the number 1 overall pick. I feel like anytime somebody brings up a fantasy football question, that's my question to them. Hey, is Adrian Peterson going to be your number 1 overall pick? And it's Adrian Peterson. He's a beast. I feel the moment he stepped foot on a football field when he first started out, there was no question about that. I mean, he's averaging almost 100 yards a game. I don't think that's going to change for him this season. But that's the difficult part. It's a very difficult question to ask. And unfortunately, when it comes to that, if somebody were to do the number 1 overall pick for AP, nobody would argue with it. But also with Le'Veon Bell, same situation. If somebody were to have him as the number 1 overall pick, yeah, he's got those 2 suspensions, but that really couldn't be argued as well. But with AP, he never really had I'm not saying he never had a strong quarterback, but even Favre days when he was at the peak of his performance, what have you, I don't think AP was able to be the best AP he could obviously be. And he's obviously the fan favorite when it comes to fantasy football. So he is my number 1 overall pick. I don't think many people can argue that with me. But at the same time, if you were to go to the number 2 spot over somebody else, I think people can back that up as well. He's just ridiculous. He can come back from that ACL injury, was it 9 months he came back from, or 2 days? I don't know, something crazy. But he's going to obviously be one of the guys to, give you those points. And obviously people are going to want those running back positions in the first round. So he's definitely my top pick for sure.
Now, going into the other end of the spectrum, Le'Veon Bell earlier this week said that he's better, he's stronger, and he's faster, and that he's looking to have a career year. Now, he had an awesome year last year. The only information that I have is that with him being out the first 2 games, as of right now, you already lose 2 games out of there, so you're looking to see if he can pull everything together for a 14-game season.
Mm-hmm.
As a team owner, do you have any trepidation in drafting him in either like the mid to late first round, or you're like, look, it's only 2 games, I don't care, you know the numbers you're going to get, especially with the way that offense is geared, I'm going to take him regardless?
I'm kind of torn, and if somebody were to, I don't think he's going to be around, depending on, unless you're a crazy person, I don't think he's going to be around late in your first round. I think he's one of my top 5 picks. But the thing is I feel like he's, like you said, he's more hungry than ever. And the first two games when he's sitting out, it's going to be like he's going to be so pumped and so agitated because he's not playing. He's just going to be on the sideline, hanging out, being bored. That 3rd game comes around, he's going to explode. And so I think you can get him in the first couple picks, and I don't think anybody's going to point and laugh at you. I think that's a great pick because it's Bell. At the same time, if he's still around in the first round towards the end, grab him as fast as possible. Don't make any stupid decisions. Just grab him. I love him so much. And, I'm a Ravens fan. So to say that I love him is I feel like I'm being very untrue to myself. But at the same time, he could go either way. I don't see him lasting long into the first. He's not going to be on your free agency list for long at all. So you could go either way with him.
Now, one of the other top running backs that people have been looking out for this year is Jamal Charles. And, after the last couple of years, people expect him to be a top 5 pick. A lot of people, though, are starting to kind of sort of sour on him a little bit. And I have no idea why. But they're saying now that the tread, there's tread on the tires. And for all those that don't know what that means, when you're a running back that touches the ball 300 to 400 times a year after a few years, you start to wear down it a little bit. You become more of an injury risk and everything. But I'm under the impression that people shouldn't worry about that because the way Andy Reid runs his offense, he's going to try to, tone it down a little bit. This way he keeps Charles as fresh as possible. Wanted to know what you think of Jamaal Charles for this season, and should people actually worry about the tread on the tires theory?
I mean, you're going to talk. It's like you're talking like broken record. And I hate when people say that. If he can stay healthy, unfortunately, that's how I am about Jamaal Charles. If he can stay healthy, he's a solid guy. He's probably my third pick. I probably my top three. And like you do say, you don't want to drive a car with treaded tires or messed up tires. And it's the same scenario with Charles. And even though he kind of gets the injury bug, who doesn't catch the injury bug? You're a running back. You're like the Marine, the front line. You're going to give him a ball and you have to go run into the fire, run into the war. He's going to get injured. It happens. But I love him. I think you can take a really strong chance on Charles as well. And, the thing with him is he's such a hard worker. You can't help but love the guy. And like you said about Reid, with those two together, they do something great. And so, I mean, you don't have to really gamble with Charles. I think with him, if you pick him, it's going to be a really good pick. So I really like him. Like I said, he's in my top 3 to 5 picks for running backs.
Now, before I send it over to my esteemed apprentice, one last question I have for you. Is there a running back out there right now that nobody is really talking about that you would keep in your back pocket as a sleeper to take in the mid to late rounds, knowing that he's going to be a starter and that he's going to come out and shock a lot of people?
I actually like Fred Jackson a lot. And the thing is a lot of people are so up on AP, Marshawn Lynch, Matt Forte, so on and so forth. But he's a little bit older. And isn't that scary that 34 is old? That's scary to me. But, with his situation, he's had more than 1,000 yards from the scrimmage line. So, I mean, it's for the last 6 years. So definitely keep an eye out for him. Obviously, he's not going to be your number one overall pick and stuff like that. But I love sleepers so much because if I'm right, I look really good. So definitely listen to me every now and then. I'm not, a wizard when it comes to that. But I like, sometimes those older guys at running backs will surprise you. So he's probably one of my guys too.
And now I shall hand you over to the esteemed apprentice of this group, Andrew Glukov. Andrew, the floor is now yours.
The esteemed apprentice.
Yeah, that's a pretty. You're esteemed. That's a big word. I always get nervous when somebody uses a big word to describe me because then I feel like I really have a.
Yeah, usually the big words that are thrown my way, delinquent and
right.
And bad words, but
yes,
nice words.
Yes, not suitable for work words. Yes.
Exactly. Jessica, one name that surrounds me, and I got to put the black and gold goggles on a little bit because he's from my alma mater, but looks like he's going to end up starting in Oakland, Latavius Murray. What's your take on him as far as that kind of under-the-radar running back?
The thing I like about Latavius is, we have to remember Oakland, and, I lived in the Bay Area for a year, so I kind of know what that team's about. The thing I hate about that team is I feel like they're a bunch of individual players and there's no glue. I think Derek Carr's desperately trying to be the glue, but it's just, I feel like if he was more of a butthead, he could actually get those guys to work together. But he's so nice. He's so easily walked all over. I feel like you need a butthead quarterback to kind of put them in their place. Now with Latavius Murray, it's kind of like that team is going to be an interesting one. But I think I like Oakland this time around. But when it comes to Murray, he's really good at carrying the ball, and that's what I really love him for. And with carrying the ball in Oakland, I think they're going to be Derek Carr's really good at throwing the ball, but we have to remember running backs can run the ball as well. So with Latavius, that's something they have to look at. And he obviously has the perfect size to handle. He's 6'3", 225, something like that. And, not necessarily one of the smaller guys. Because, when I think of running back, I feel like I can actually have a chance in the NFL because I'm 5-0. I'm like, oh, well, Ray Rice is small. Obviously, it's a really bad example, but you know what I mean. But, you know, Murray, I really like the way that he carries the ball. So with him, I feel like if he can find the right, you know, does the right routes and stuff like that with that team, they're really working hard to make Oakland. I don't think Oakland's going to necessarily go to the Super Bowl, but with that team, they're working so hard in the offseason to make some really, really, really smart plays or, you know, picks in the draft. Murray definitely has a chance as far as fantasy-wise to really help out your team. Probably, you know, more towards late in the draft, but he's obviously a really good guy to have on your bench in case something happens. So I really like Murray too. So I'm glad I can give you good news with a guy from your alma mater.
Yeah, you know, it's good to see, you know, us small school people, you know, not from the power conferences have players in the league, you know, Blake Bortles, Brandon Marshall, and Latavius Murray.
Yeah, I'm a Ravens fan, so it's like Joe Flacco, people have never heard of the college he went to. They're like, what? He went to a D what school? So I totally get it. Totally understand.
Yeah, there just happens to be 3 UCF players on Baltimore, but that's besides the point. I'm from Cleveland. That's airball.
Yeah, of course.
But moving on, you know, I was looking at running backs that have that ability, that have had a lot of success, can do a lot, but maybe some people have been shying away for one reason or another. I'm looking at Arian Foster. Gotten the news for a slightly offhanded comment, but, you know, he played 13 games last year and still ended up in the top 10 of yards. Do you see Foster remaining in that top echelon, or is the quarterback problem in Houston going to bog down on his production?
I mean, I think obviously people forget that it's not just J.J. Watt on that team. But with Arian Foster, the thing that I don't like about him is he does not know how to play a full season. It's so difficult for him. But obviously, when he is on the field, the guy's phenomenal. But he's been. It's weird though. He's 29, but I feel like he's been around for like 75 years. It just feels like he's been playing for so long. And I mean, he kind of has. But with him, I mean, his yards per carry isn't quite 5, but at the same time, I mean, he's a huge wild card for me. He's obviously a top 10 pick for me. I'm not crazy about him this season. I'm not going to, you know, throw him a birthday party in my head, but just because of him, it's risky. I think he's more of a risky pick than Jamal Charles is. You know, he just, like I said, he has the inability to stay a full season. But with that, especially with that team, because, you know, same thing with the Texans, they're kind of a filler team sometimes. But with him, the quarterback situation is going to be his biggest issue as well. So with he can barely stay on the field as it is, plus the quarterback issue. It's definitely a risky pick. I know at FanDuel we have him as a top 5. I don't necessarily agree with that, but I didn't write that part of the magazine. But I do feel like he is a top 10 running back. If you were to pick him, just, you know, beware. Other than that, though, he's not the worst pick you can absolutely have for that position.
The mad scientist himself had to inform me, because on my sister's birthday, so I was obviously living under a rock that day. He did manage to get hurt again, and so you're absolutely right. He can't stay a full season because he's not going to stay a full season.
Yeah, exactly. So with that being said, yeah, and you know, we drafted him, and yeah, he's kind of a mess, that Arian Foster. He needs to be in a bubble. He needs to be in a bubble, and nobody touches him. Just wrap him in some saran wrap and leave him alone forever.
He can go hang out with Sam Bradford in the bubble.
Yeah.
The two may touch each other and shatter. But I digress. You know, you have DeMarco Murray switching from one city to the other. He had great output, over 100 yards a game, 13 touchdowns. You know, he's tied in the league lead for that. Still had a little case of fumbleitis. Needs to go to the Tiki Barber School of Football Handling. Do you see him switching to Philadelphia with a different coach, different style, that his production is going to stay up, go higher, go down? Where do you see on the barometer of DeMarco Murray being the elite of NFL running backs?
I like DeMarco Murray. I mean, sometimes a change of scenery is best, maybe. But the thing is he's not going to be your first running back taken off the board. He's not going to necessarily rush the ball a bunch of times. It would have worked out well. It wouldn't have worked out well for his health at least. But the thing is with DeMarco Murray is, I don't know. I'm not, like I said, kind of the same scenario with Arian Foster, not all like pumped up on him. I think his thing is that change of scenery, is going to be really well. And he's obviously he's been very solid in his preseason. And I think he had almost 200 points in 2015, or this, I guess it's 2014, 2015. The whole calendar thing kind of screwed me up. But after some rest, he's great. I think that if they push him too hard, I'm worried about him getting injured. Other than that, though, he's probably one of my top 10. So I like him a lot, and I think with that new change of scenery, he can obviously do a lot of good for Philly. And I think the Eagles are one of my sleepers this year for sure. So him on that team is definitely going to be pretty awesome.
I got one more question. It's a two-parter because it deals with the same original team. I'm talking about the San Francisco 49ers. They lose Frank Gore to free agency, and he's the second part of the question. Is Carlos Hyde ready to take the mantle as the feature back of the Niners? And if so, how much, from a fantasy standpoint, are you willing to back him on that?
I love Carlos Hyde. I've actually been pretty high on him since last season, and it wasn't actually until I went to the very first Levi's game, or game at Levi's last season for preseason. It was perfect. I got like all my bucket list stuff out of the way. I got to Levi's Stadium, got to see Peyton Manning play all in one shot. It was amazing. And somebody said, "Hey, why don't you check out Carlos Hyde?" And I've heard about him, but I wasn't really too pumped on him. But we have him, I believe, top 20 at FanDuel. And obviously, with Frank Gore and everybody else on the Niners gone, he obviously has to step up to the plate. Probably not the best metaphor to use, but it's just what I use. But the Gore era did come to an end. And the thing I like about him is he actually has a very similar running style to Gore. And I really like Hyde because he's physically fit. I mean, obviously all the guys are, but he's just kind of a physical beast. And he's a very strong fantasy candidate. I really want him to get around 250 carries this season. I think that'd be phenomenal. I think that people need to, look out for him. And people are kind of worried. They're so worried about the San Francisco 49ers. He's not going to be taken really quickly. People are kind of like, the Niners are going to suck. Don't worry about them, blah, blah, blah. Hyde's one of my favorites. So probably top 20. Don't go too crazy over him. But not a lot of people are going to be paying attention to the Niners because they're just like, rest in peace, 49ers. But I really like Hyde. I think he's got a lot of workload he's got to work on, so you might feel the pressure of that. However, with the Niners team, I don't think they're going to be as bad as people are anticipating them to be.
On the flip side, Frank Gore believes goes to Indianapolis. How will working with Andrew Luck as your quarterback and with such an all-star receiving core there, how will that improve Frank Gore's productivity for next year, and does that legitimately increase his draft value?
Absolutely. Frank Gore isn't necessarily top 10 running back, and he's a little bit older, which of course, 32 is unfortunately old these days. But with him and Andrew Luck, I think it's going to be phenomenal. I think Andrew Luck and Colin Kaepernick, they're young quarterbacks. They have two totally different styles. Obviously, Colin Kaepernick can run the ball. Andrew Luck is phenomenal no matter what he does in the pocket. But anything that is thrown in Frank Gore's way or anything that was handed to Frank Gore is going to be taken care of. And, obviously Gore has a lot of a past and can probably adjust really well. And, it's not like the Alex Smith scenario. Alex Smith scenario and for the Niners, a different offense every single season. And, when they go over to Indy, I think it's just such a solid team. You're playing for an amazing coach. You're playing with an amazing quarterback. Like you said, an amazing receiving team. I think that boosted up Gore's value quite a bit. That teaming up with a quarterback like Andrew Luck, the sky's the limit for him in those Colts. I'm so excited to see what that team does.
Nick, back to you.
Now, Jessica, I have one more question for you, and it's it's actually kind of sort of a loaded question, but if there was a running back that you wanted to stay far, far away from this coming season, and even though he's on the draft board staring right at you, and you know he's the guy that a lot of people would want to take, but there's someone that you just don't, you just have a really bad feeling that something bad is going to happen this year, and you got to say, no, I'm not doing it. Who's that running back and why?
You know, that's it. You're gonna make me like pick on people. You're so mean. But I'm gonna have to say Reggie Bush, and not just because once you date Kim Kardashian, your life's over. But the thing about Reggie Bush is, he's a good addition to the team. But the only thing that I'm nervous about with him is those injuries. I mean, it's the same thing. I mean, and I think he kind of was cursed, right coming out of college. It was like, okay, Reggie Bush is going to be amazing. But then the next, in NFL, it's like, who is this guy? He's never really impressed me. I'm never impressed by Reggie Bush in the NFL. Somebody that you should definitely stay away with. Yeah, we all know his name, but it's not somebody that I'm going to be obviously pumped all over. And if you look at a lot of people's basically write-ups of him, it's the same scenario. It's like, yeah, he's kind of there. He's maybe a top 50 running back, and there's some great players in the like 40 to 50 range, but he's just not really ever been one of my favorite guys. And I think he has a lot. He's very exaggerated coming into the NFL period, and he's been on every team in the NFL, it seems. So obviously nobody wants him. So stay the hell away from Reggie Bush. I don't like him. Don't do it. Stay away. Say no.
Awesome. Jessica, thank you so much for joining us tonight. You've been absolutely awesome. And I got to say, I became a big fan of yours when I started reading, when I started getting into, like, FanDuel's website and everything like that. And I happened to stumble upon a couple of your articles, and I was like, wow, I need to get this woman on my show for my special. And when you said yes, I will admit I did a happy dance. Yes, me, a 40-something-year-old guy, doing a happy dance that he got someone of your stature on my show, which is absolutely amazing. So I want to thank you so much for taking some time out for doing this. I know you're probably at the World Championship Fantasy Baseball thingy, out west or anything like that, on behalf of FanDuel. But why don't you let the good people know where they can find you? And I do have to say one thing, though. I really did enjoy the pic of you reading the magazine and your mom just happening to snap the pic while you were reading one of your articles in the FanDuel Fantasy Football magazine. I think that was pretty. It
was pretty awesome. It was like the perfect moment. I went there looking for like a random book, and then I was like, oh my gosh, I'm in 2 fantasy magazines. So we went straight over to the fantasy section. It was great. My mom was like, it was like I like made this cute little picture in first grade, and she wanted to hang it on the fridge. It was the coolest moment ever. So yeah, I appreciate that. But you can find me on Twitter at KleinschmidtJD. It's just Klein and Schmidt put together. It's a very long last name, but it's just way more intimidating looking than it actually is. You can find me on FanDuel at FanDuel.com/insider, and I do everything from viral trending media stuff to your daily fantasy picks and everything like that. So just look me up that way.
Well, Jessica, thank you so much, and I definitely would love to have you on the show again during football season if your schedule actually permits. But thank you so much for joining us this evening live right here on the Ladies of Fantasy Football special. Good luck to you in any of the leagues that you're in, and I can't wait to see the rest of the articles that come out from here on out. So have a good one.
Thank you guys so much. Appreciate it. Have a good one.
You as well.
That was Jessica Kleinschmidt from FanDuel.com. I got to tell you, she's a breath of fresh air, and, she's really smart. And when you read her stuff, she puts a very, very good perspective on everything that she does.
Absolutely. The idea of these almost micro fantasy leagues, that puts a lot of pressure on their writers and analysts to come up with really good stuff. So kudos to Jessica for being involved with FanDuel, which has become such a big name in micro fantasy sports, which is the new thing, the new daily thing, weekly thing. However it works out, it's become a whole movement, really.
It really has, and I got to say that, daily fantasy football has pretty much become like the rage the last couple of years, and with FanDuel and DraftKings and FanDrafter, and now with CBS Sportsline getting involved and Yahoo getting involved, ESPN, getting involved, that it's going to be like something that's going to be, really, really huge for a really long time. And it's best to be done. I personally think it's best to be done with football because you can do it once a week out of 17 weeks. You don't have, there's no, labor-intensive research of doing something, every week for a full season. You can be like just looking at matchups for that particular week and be done with it. I haven't done it yet. People have been telling me to do it. Who knows? Maybe I will. I'm still a purist, an old-timer. I'm still getting into the DFS.
You're just
craze.
Old.
So, but yeah, I set myself up for that one. Anyway, we're coming to the halfway. Yeah, I know. We're coming to the halfway point, and I don't know if people have seen or heard, but this little podcast has been nominated for the What a Fan Media Online Award for Best Podcast, and What a Fan has just posted my nomination on various websites as well as various posts on Facebook pages. And when the nominations came out about a month ago, I made a big thing out of it. I still, to this day, cannot believe that this show has been nominated for such an award. And, obviously, unfortunately, I will not be in attendance that day, whether to either applaud the winner of such an award or to accept such an award. I did find out that the award winners will be announced on that day. Nothing will be posted sooner. But even though I will not be there, I will be there in spirit. And obviously, my esteemed apprentice will be there, hopefully to pick up an award and give a very nice speech if and when we do win. And, the shoes that we have to fill from the last couple of years are pretty big shoes. Because last year, our good friends on the Wednesday night show, Sports Infusion with Pamela Michelle and Andrew Fishbane, they won the award. And, to follow that is really a tall order. And whoever wins for 2015, will have to keep on the great tradition that it is for online media podcasts and all that jazz. We're coming into the second half of our show, ladies and gentlemen. We're waiting for our next Lady of Fantasy Football, Liz Loza from Scout.com. As soon as she comes on, obviously I'll give her proper introduction. She's been on this show before. But, Drew, I have to say, the first half of the show with Renee, Allie, and Jessica, it's been absolutely top-notch.
It's been absolutely top-notch, but, Nick, I got to say, having me represent you at that awards, you got a lot of faith put into me. I'm just saying.
Well, you've been with me since day one. So when we did TSC Saturday night, and then when we transformed over to this show, even though you did go on hiatus for a little bit and everything, but, you've been a part of this for quite a long time. And, I would have nobody better represent me than you over there.
Oh, I appreciate that. I appreciate that a lot. And yeah, it was a painful hiatus, just because I had to take care of a loaded schedule. But now that we're back into the swing of things, it's been a wild ride so far, and I'm looking forward to continue riding forward into that old horizon.
Yeah, and what better way than to continue the great tradition that is the Mad Scientist Sports Lab special, the Ladies of Fantasy Football, than our next guest. I've been trying to prepare an introduction for her because there's really nothing more to be said. She is one of the best fantasy football experts out there. She's been on this show many of times, and to watch her videos on Scout.com and the way that she presents herself and the way that she's so eloquent and the way that she gets the message across of what to do and what not to do is something that, you know, I always look forward to during the football season on a weekly basis. And to always have her on this show is a high honor. It's nothing but the utmost respect for her. And, well, I got to say, she's also a really good friend. And I wouldn't want to have it any other way than to start my second half of the show with the lovely, the talented, the beautiful, and obviously one of the best fantasy football minds of all time, Ms. Liz Loza, the fantasy football girl. Hello, Liz. How you doing?
Well, I feel like I should just drop the mic now because that was the most glowing intro I might have ever received. Are you available for events as a hype man? Shoot.
We do take bribes.
I could be, but what do you call it? For you, I do it for free. So that's just a no-brainer right there.
Nick, we need money. Do it for the money, man. Come on.
No pressure. I hope I deliver now. All right, so it's a Saturday night. I spent a couple hours with my toddler, and I've had a couple of beers. Let's get that eloquence going.
Awesome. What do you call it? Toddler, beers, football, what better? Anyway, we're talking wide receivers
beers and football without the toddler. That's what's better.
You make a good point. I just finished one. I need to crack open another one.
We're talking wide receivers with the fantasy football girl, Liz Loza, live right here tonight on the Ladies of Fantasy Football special. Liz, let's get off the bat right now. Let's get off the bat right now with Antonio Brown from the Pittsburgh Steelers. A lot of people are pegging him this year to be the number one wide receiver to be drafted, ahead of such guys as Demaryius Thomas, Dez Bryant, Megatron Calvin Johnson. I am one of those believers that think that he is the number one wide receiver. It seems like every week he puts up the big points. Do you think that's going to hold true this year, or do you think there's some trepidation that they may decide to pull back a little bit with the emergence of one Le'Veon Bell?
I am not. I do have Antonio Brown number one in my wide receiver ranking, so I do think where he's going is about right. I think in PPR leagues he is going around the sixth pick of PPR draft overall and the first wide receiver off the board. So I think that makes perfect sense. I think Big Ben's going to throw a lot. You know, he's really thrived in Todd Haley's offense, the passing-friendly offense. Obviously, we also have Le'Veon Bell benched due to suspension for the first 2 weeks, which means more throwing for Ben Roethlisberger. And the fact that Brown is so versatile, he can play the inside, he can play the slot, gives him a much higher ceiling than some of the other guys. And let's be honest, we've got Marcus Wheaton, who Big Ben has been talking up a lot in camp, but we also have Martavis Bryant, who looks pretty good. No elbow injury issues, didn't seem, nearly as raw as he was last year, also vying for that spot. So while people are cooling a little bit to Martavis Bryant because of Big Ben's or Roethlisberger's glowing comments of Wheaton, I don't think either one of them is going to be a threat enough to an elite talent like Brown.
Now, who do you have going right behind them? Because there are a lot of people that are in the Calvin Johnson camp. There's a lot of people in the Dez Bryant camp. A lot of people in the Demaryius Thomas camp. It seems to me that 1 through 4 are so interchangeable that people are like, everybody has a preference. My preference is Antonio Brown, but where do you put 2, 3, and 4?
So I think it's a little bit different
very slightly based on standard or PPR scoring leagues. In standard leagues, I am going to lean towards Dez because he is a red zone machine, right? I don't know how he does it, but he always scores a ton in the red zone. And I do think that the Cowboys are not going to have quite the run game that they did last year, and they're going to have to throw a little bit more. So I like Dez right behind Antonio Brown. He's number 2 in my wide receiver rankings. That said, I love Julio Jones, especially in a Kyle Shanahan-led offense. I think, though, that Jones has more upside in PPR leagues, right? Because he's going to see more, he's going to probably have more receptions than Bryant, but maybe not see the red zone as frequently, though he is looking awfully good, and I am increasingly high. So I think those two, you know, again, if I'm thinking standard scoring, touchdowns are king in that scoring format, I'm going to lean towards Dez. If I'm going PPR, I like that upside. I like Julio Jones. So I'm leaning there. You could flip a coin. I mean, if you're in that position, you really can't go wrong. After that, you've got Demaryius Thomas. I do think he'll continue to be a ball hog, even in a, quote, more balanced offense. You do have Julius Thomas no longer there, and you've got Emmanuel Sanders moving to the slot. So I think they're going to continue to force feed Demaryius Thomas. I'm not worried about him, you know, being troubled by elite cornerback coverage because he is such an amazing talent that he can beat anybody. So I think that that's still pretty safe. And then I actually have Odell Beckham Jr. ahead of Megatron. He is a riskier play, and I've warned against him as being a risky play, but I tend to want to draft to the boom, to draft to the ceiling, if you will. And so for that reason, I mean, it's hard not to draft on Odell Beckham Jr. It's just that if you do that, then you want to make sure to balance out the rest of your roster later in your draft and find more of those higher floor versus high ceiling type guys. If he does, you know, maybe not see the targets he did last year with Cruz and Vereen and Jennings in the mix, if he does re-injure his hamstrings, if he does, there's one other thing. Oh, if defenses have watched enough tape to key in on him. But, I mean, his talent is so incredible. He, as a rookie, you know, as a rookie who didn't even start the season, who missed camp, who missed the preseason, was smoking guys like Richard Sherman. So I think that he's just, when you're uncoverable, you get to be drafted in the first round. So that's why I have him ahead of Calvin Johnson. But those would be my top guys.
Now, you mentioned Victor Cruz, and a lot of people are wondering what Victor Cruz is going to show up, being that he's coming back from such a devastating injury. Everybody remembers from 2 years ago when he broke out, had an amazing season. You know, the salsa dance became the rage in the NFL. When he got hurt last year, when he got hurt, everybody thought, well, that's pretty much it. And that brought on the legend of ODB. Putting these two guys together, do you see Victor Cruz getting back to where he was a couple of years ago, numbers-wise, or do you see him falling into like that 11 to 20 rank where you know you're going to get 70, 1,000, and maybe 6 to 8 touchdowns?
I don't think he's going to be an elite guy. He's going at the end of the 6th round in PPR draft. So, you know, you're seeing him go after Allen Robinson, Sammy Watkins, Nelson Aguilar, and then you're getting Cruz, but he's ahead of guys like Deshaun Jackson and Vincent Jackson. I think that might be a little bit expensive, frankly. I wouldn't mind taking him in like a round later. I do think though he'll present, you know, wide receiver 2 numbers, especially in a McAdoo-led offense. I think the Giants, I'm doing this off the top of my head, so I think that they ran the 4th most passing plays in the league last year. And we know that McAdoo calls a lot of plays because they were like maybe the 5th most running plays. So it was just a high play count, which obviously means more opportunities for their receivers and offensive weapons, running backs alike, to score. I also think when you look at their defense, they're not playing, just bear with me for a second because I can't resist myself, they're not playing with all hands on deck. So I think that Eli Manning will have to throw quite a bit, and Cruz could be the recipient of a decent volume, but I don't think he's going to be able to convert on those targets the way he did 2 years ago.
Now, before I pass it over to my esteemed apprentice, Andrew Blucloff, I do have one more question for you, and that is, if there is one wide receiver that you must stay away from that you think is going to have a complete drop-off of the season, whether it be to like knocks or injury, or you just think that, Father Time is starting to take its toll, or you think he's just like completely overrated, what wide receiver would that be, and who would you tell to like say, no, I'm not going there, even though he's like screaming to be drafted at any given point?
Well, it's tough when you say any given point, right? Because I feel like anyone has value if there is value. So while I may not be particularly high on like Emmanuel Sanders this season or Jarvis Landry, I'm one of the few who is not particularly high on Jarvis Landry. If those guys fall to me and the value is delectable, then it's hard to pass on them, because I think that's what any staunch drafter is going to do. They're going to want to find the value and not pay last season's prices. But if there is some guy that I am just like running backs, I will be totally honest, I'm not drafting any of the Dallas backfield. Like, nope, no thanks. I'm going to pass. I feel a little bit similarly, but not quite as strongly about Cleveland's backfield. So if I'm looking for a wide receiver that is kind of gets me going in that same way, I'm not touching Percy Harvin. I'm not touching Ruben Randall, but those are really late round guys. I want to give you someone that's like juicy enough up front. Yeah, you know what? I'm not touching Julian Edelman in the 4th round. Like that's wide receiver, high end wide receiver 2 money, and I feel like there are other places I'd want to go with that. And his usage, no Tom Brady, might be a little bit tough to predict. So I think that's some guy. It's not because I think he's going to get injured or because I don't think he's talented. It's just not who I want as my wide receiver too. I want something a little bit more consistent than that. Otherwise, I think anyone is interesting if they're cheap. So that's kind of where I like to find how I like to build my roster.
Well, I got a wide receiver that I'm probably going to stay away from, and it's only for the sheer fact because of the Arian Foster injury that took place, and that's DeAndre Hopkins. I mean,
are you really? I mean, he's so talented. Like, you don't think that he'll be able to, do you think that he'll be so troubled with coverage?
Well, for his ADP right now, knowing that his quarterback is, I think it's Ryan Mallett, and with Alfred Blue in the backfield, and he doesn't really have a second wide receiver, I mean, I think me personally, I just think he's going to be overvalued, and I think his ADP for me would be too high. So I would definitely take your tack, though, and see if he drops a little bit, and if there's value in the pick, I will take it like that. But ADP-wise, I just personally think that he's going to be too high, and if he's there, I think I can find another wide receiver at that, at that level.
So let's dig into this, though. This is fascinating to me because DeAndre Hopkins is going around the same place as Julian Edelman, who I brought up. So you've got, here's it goes Brandon Cooks. After the top 10, I'm just looking at PPR ADP on FF Calculator. Alshon Jeffrey's the 10th spot. After that, you've got T.Y. Hilton, Mike Evans, Brandon Cooks, Jordan Matthews, Emmanuel Sanders, Hopkins, Andre Johnson, Julian Edelman, Amari Cooper, and Golden Tate. So of those 10 guys, it's, Hopkins and Julian Edelman are in the back half of that 10, that next 10 guys. So who would you prefer? Would you just totally sidestep the wide receiver position at that point and maybe look at running back depth instead and then wait on wide receiver and go with someone cheaper like, I don't know, Allen Robinson, John Brown, Nelson Aguilar a couple of rounds later? Or if you were going to have to bite in that chunk of 3 to 4 round range, then would you want Emmanuel Sanders ahead of DeAndre Hopkins? I would rather have DeAndre Hopkins than Emmanuel Sanders because I just feel like he is a superior talent, and I don't think Sanders, I think you're paying for Sanders. I owned a bunch of him last year, but I think you're paying for last year's prices with Emmanuel Sanders in the end of the third. I know Hopkins broke out last year, but I also feel like he can separate in a way. I mean, we saw Hard Knocks, right? We saw what he did to D'Angelo Hall. Not that that's an esteemed defender, but I just feel like the talent is so good that he's going to find a way to make plays happen.
I think I might actually do that. I think I might actually wait another round and take someone. It's just me personally. I just feel that. I just feel that you just look at that lineup and take away DeAndre Hopkins, and it's almost like the most vanilla offensive starting, quarterback, running back, wide receivers outside of DeAndre Hopkins. It's so vanilla that I wouldn't be surprised if they try to bracket him 10 ways to Sunday. And it scares the living death out of me. Now, in a couple of weeks when I have my draft, Lord knows I'll probably have so many beers in me that I'll probably take them anyway in the 4th round or 5th round or anything like that. And I'll be, people like, but didn't you say that on your show? It's like, yeah, I was sober then, but that's another story for another day. Anyway,
you have a good point, and I think also the thing with Hopkins and with any of the Texans is that with Hard Knocks, you're going to pay a little bit more because of name recognition. So that might be another reason to avoid him.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm going to pass it now to my esteemed colleague, the apprentice, Andrew Glukov.
I think he's just trying to get away. he saw that he lost.
Run away!
Nick's used to that. But I digress. You look at, a number of the top half, the top, 3 tiers or so of wide receivers that didn't play a whole season, that had almost an artificial deflation of their stats, like an AJ Green or Roddy White. Missed a little bit of time, but, we've seen what they can do. How do you feel that the fact that they missed a little bit of time for one reason or another is going to impact their draft status come over the next few weeks during draft season?
Well, I love when people demonstrate recency bias and they forget that AJ Green is an elite talent. And I also think, AJ Green's absence last season also has affected Andy Dalton's ADP this year. And Andy Dalton is by no means an exciting quarterback. He's got the brand around him that he can't win in prime time, though Jeremy Hill certainly helped him out at the end of last season against the Broncos. But they lose on the Saturday of the first round of the playoffs, and this is the stigma surrounding Andy Dalton. However, in 2013, he was a top 5 fantasy QB, and that's when he had AJ Green healthy. Last year, Marvin Jones was also injured. Tyler Eifert was gone. This year, he's got those guys back. Oh, and let's be honest, Mohamed Sanu cannot catch a ball. He led the league, I believe, in drops, according to Pro Football Focus last season. He was either dead last or second to last in ball drops, meaning the most. And so you've got Giovanni Bernard with another year in Hugh Jackson's system, and he's really emerging as a nice PPR threat, passing back and pass catching back. And then you've got the other receivers that I mentioned healthy. So I think that really helps Andy Dalton's ADP. As far as AJ Green, though, I mean, it's crazy to me that he is barely the bottom of the top 10 according to most rankings in ADP. So sure, give me that AJ Green value. Like, I'll take it all day long, And as far as Roddy White, though, I mean, I think there's a difference when you look at a guy like AJ Green, who is young, who's in his prime, and he gets injured, versus a guy like Roddy White, who is clearly heading towards the decline of his career. So it's a little bit different. I think you have to look at each situation independently. There's another guy. So I feel like Marquez Colston has a lot of veteran value this season. He could potentially be valuable. But if you miss out on Colston, I wouldn't mind taking a flyer on Brandon Coleman in one of the last rounds of your draft, because if Colston, whose knees are like made out of styrofoam peanuts at this point, were to go down, Coleman seems like the guy who would step in and replace him. He does appear to be winning that third receiver position on the depth chart for the Saints. Sean Payton called him the winner of camp, the standout of camp. So he's someone that he's surpassed Nick Toon, and with Kenny Stills in Miami, Brandon Cook is a wide receiver 1, and Colston is wide receiver 2. Like, to me, Brandon Coleman is a nice stash value for when Colston were to break down. But depending on how the draft falls to you, I think Colston is one of those guys who could present nice value. He's probably going to get injured, though.
But he seems to always be in the right place at the right time in the red zone. I don't know what it is with Marquez Colston, but he always seems to have that knack for scoring. My next question deals with Golden Tate, arguably like my least favorite player in the NFL.
Yeah.
I just don't like this guy. Not because he's a bad personality. Every time I hear him do something, it makes me cringe.
So wait, you're not a fan of maple donuts, Ben?
No, ma'am. I'll take the Boston cream, thank you.
All right.
But he had an outstanding run last year. Great season. With him being lined up with Megatron, and Johnson had an uncharacteristically lackluster year. It was an off year for him. I'm expecting Calvin Johnson to be back on his A game. Where does this leave Golden Tate? Where do you see him falling? You put him in that second group of receivers when you were mentioning, with Edelman and whatnot. And I wanted to jump in and say, throw him at the bottom, throw Tate at the bottom. Where do you see him falling this season as far as his, potential productivity?
Well, I don't think his stats from last season are sustainable. I do think there's going to be a regression. The thing to remember about Golden Tate is that he's 5'10", 200 pounds. He's not built to be a red zone weapon the way that Megatron is, And so, but the thing that Tate does do is he gives you those receptions. He had like almost 100, I believe, receptions last year and 1,300 yards receiving. So I don't think he's going to get you that. But I do think that he is, there's talk too, you've got Lombardi's system, and that's kind of the problem because it's based on the New Orleans offense where the ball is more spread around. So I obviously Megatron is the ball hog, is the X in that offense. But I've read enough reports. I don't know how much I'm buying them, but at least I'm reading them that the tight end Eric Ebron is starting to come around. You've got Amir Abdullah, who is just blowing up the preseason and shooting up draft boards. Obviously, a threat in the passing game. He's incredible hands. So I do think the emergence of those two guys is going to take some of the volume away from Tate. So I do think there's going to be a regression. And he's someone that I'm not particularly excited about as my wide receiver too. So yeah, I think I think the more we're looking at this and talking about it, it is that glut of guys that I would rather look at. To me, there's more running back depth in the third and fourth rounds than receiving depth, and so I would rather concentrate on that position and then wait a couple of rounds and get the Deshaun Jacksons, John Browns, Charles Johnsons, and that Eddie Royal. Although Eddie Royal, man, I just got to be I'm a Bears fan. And so I was high on Eddie Royal in June, and I owned a bunch of shares of him in some NFL 10s and some early drafts. And now, he was free, literally free, undrafted, and now he's going in the 9th round, 10th round. I hate that. I was why couldn't I have drafted some of these teams now that he's climbing up draft boards? But I think you're right in terms of getting back to Golden Tate that he's not going to see the volume of targets he did last year, and so there is going to be a regression. I think he has he's still got low-end wide receiver 2 potential, but I'm not particularly excited about him.
Good. I'm not either. Next one up, you talk about the Bears, Alshon Jeffrey. He lost Brandon Marshall this offseason. Moving on to the Jets. How is this going to impact Jeffrey's productivity? He had a good season last year. Normally this guy misses games. He didn't miss any games last year and still, put double-digit touchdowns on the board. How will not having Brandon Marshall, where Jeffrey's now the number one guy, going to have to face the shutdown corner, how is his game going to be impacted by this increased responsibility?
I think he's going to do just fine. And that's not a homer pick. I like him a lot. I think he has nice wide receiver 1 potential. I think he's talented enough to handle top cornerback coverage. I also feel like you have to look at that team and the characteristics of that team. And Jay Cutler is the kind of quarterback that locks in on a target. And when obviously he and Marshall have a long-standing bromance that extends both states and years. And when Marshall was gone, Jeffrey stepped up and became that person. They have a pre-existing rapport. I do think that's part of the reason, tangentially why I enjoy Eddie Royal being on that team, because I do think given Cutler's rapport with Royal back from his Denver days, that'll reemerge. But I think that's going to be Cutler's guy. He's big. He's on the outside. He's a touchdown machine. They know each other's idiosyncrasies, and so I am very confident in his talent and his ability. I mean, he's 6'3", 216 pounds, right? We're not talking about a guy of smaller stature trying to bust coverage. So I think he's going to be fine, and I do like him in my top 10 wide receivers.
All right, I have one more question, and now you probably actually don't get much of these. I'm going down south to where I currently live in the Tampa Bay area. You had two receivers with 1,000-yard seasons despite the fact they had no offensive plan whatsoever. But I want to focus on Mike Evans. Mike Evans had a great start, 1,000 yards, 12 touchdowns, with a new quarterback and a new system in place. Where do you see a young star of a receiver like Mike Evans going as far as the draft due to having Jameis Winston as a quarterback? And is he worth a low-round risk?
So Evans is interesting. He's one of those guys that I can't quite put my finger on. Everybody loves him. I mean, I get it. He has an amazing catch radius, 6'5", 230-ish pounds in that, 225, 230, something in that range. Amazing breakout season despite, as you mentioned, the lack of talent under center and also the lack of offensive play call. I mean, Jeff Tedford left and you had some Yahoo named Marcus Arroyo calling plays. That's not, a recipe for success. Dirk Cotter coming over from Atlanta this year to handle the play calling. I think that Evans has his size going for him, but we also have to remember that last season Vincent Jackson was drawing the elite cornerback coverage. So Evans has the benefit of softer coverage. Defenses are going to look at that. Evans he pushes off a little bit. When we look at tape, no, I'm going to get slack for it, but he does push off a little bit. He's a big dude. He's not like super fast, that's when you have the size, it's rare that you have that amazing burst. I'm not taking away from his talent, but he does tend to push off a little bit. I don't know if he's going to get away with that as much this year. So for me, he's one of those guys that, I guess back to Nick's question, I'm not down on him, but he's not the guy that in a situation I'm dying to take. I do think that his stats last year, what did he end? He had 12 touchdowns, right? 1,000 yards. I think he could end up around there again, but I don't think he's going to improve on those stats in his sophomore season.
All right, Nick, take us home.
Liz, as always, an honor, a pleasure having you on our show. Why don't you let the people know where they can find you, although I really don't think that you should, because everybody should already be following you from here into high water.
Oh, thank you. Well, you can find me, I think most of all, go to Yahoo Fantasy Sports. I am thrilled to have joined their team this season. It's a great group of fantasy minds. If you haven't signed up for your league, I this is no joke. I have been playing on Yahoo Fantasy since I started playing fantasy football. It is the format and league that I tell everyone to play on when they're either beginning or well into their fantasy career. So go to sports.yahoo.com/fantasy and do sign up for a league. We've got the National Draft Day, which is taking place in Vegas, sponsored by the Hard Rock Hotel next weekend. I will be there Thursday through Sunday. We're working that, so 3 nights in Vegas. Please come see me if you want to, not the last night, because I don't know how together I'll be anymore. But otherwise, if you want to follow me in particular, go to me. You can follow me on Twitter at LizLoza_FF. That's at LIZLOZA_FF. And again, just go to the Roto Arcade on Yahoo at sports.yahoo.com/fantasy, and we're there for you.
That's so awesome. Congratulations to you being part of the Yahoo Fantasy Football squad. Very top-notch over there. And, of course, I would be remiss in saying that I am one of your biggest fans, always have been, always will be, no matter where you go and everything like that. And I definitely would like to get you back on during the football season. I know you usually have a busy schedule, but as always, an honor and a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you so much, Nick. It was a pleasure being here. It's always fun to talk football with you and to talk football in general. You know where to find me, so I'd be happy to come back later in the season. Have a great night, guys.
You too.
You
Have
as
a
well.
good one.
Bye-bye.
And that is the fantasy football girl, Liz Loza, now part of Yahoo Fantasy Sports, which is a great pickup for Yahoo. I mean, no doubt, pretty much a no-doubter. But I would be remiss in not saying I can't end the show with a Jersey girl. Yeah, that's right. I'm being a little bit biased tonight because I needed to have a Jersey girl on my show tonight. And what better person to have than Blindside Football's premier fantasy football guru, Marcus. I know you're probably listening. To have her on my show is, again, an honor and a pleasure. Ladies and gentlemen, she calls herself the Degenerate, and I only mean that in a very nice way because that's her Twitter handle. But when it comes to fantasy football, don't even bother calling her that. She'll wipe the floor with you clean. Ladies and gentlemen, Jersey's own Jen Ryan. Jen, how you doing tonight?
I'm good, thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, no problem. So, Jen, we're going to have you on. We're going to talk a little bit about tight ends and other fantasy football paraphernalia that we've been talking about tonight. Tight end-wise, the big news during the offseason, Jimmy Graham moving from New Orleans and the comfy confines of the Superdome and catching passes from Drew Brees, now going up to Seattle and now catching passes from Russell Wilson. While in New Orleans, obviously, he had some great talent surrounding him on the wide receiver end. Not so much now within Seattle. So obviously, you know, he's going to be targeted a lot more by Russell Wilson, but you also have to worry about defenses keying on him a lot more. Just wanted to get your take on that, and where do you think it's going to hurt his draft position, or do you think because he's going to be targeted a lot more by Russ, it's going to enhance his position more?
Well, I mean, as far as his draft position, I think it probably helps it because it kind of had his value slide a little bit. But in terms of fantasy points, see him sort of replicating what he did with Drew Brees, especially on that run-heavy offense. But I guess the one thing he really does have going for him, I mean, he's the default wide receiver one out there this season, and he's just pretty much uncoverable in the red zone. So I just don't see him putting up the same numbers he put up with his good buddy Drew.
Now, when it comes, do you have to agree, though, that, you know, with only having, say, Doug Baldwin and a couple other guys, you know, up there, you know, Russell Wilson's going to probably, check down a lot to him. I see his receptions going up, but I see his yards and his yards per catch going down. I also see him, though, being the main target in the red zone. Do you think that do you think it's conceivable that he may match Gronk touchdown-wise, but is going to lose a lot in the PPR aspect of it?
I mean, certainly. I mean, he has the upside, the talent to match Gronk, and you know, the Brady suspension being up in the air still, I think that it could take a hit to Gronk's value. I don't think he's necessarily guaranteed to finish first. I think Jimmy will still finish up there, top 5, but really, last season, I feel like we saw just a slight downtick in him in terms of his yards, his, yards per reception, touchdowns. He had 6 less touchdowns last season than he did in 2013, and I still think the offense in Seattle is going to be focused around Marshawn Lynch, but no question, he'll still be a threat in the end zone. It's just, you hear these rumors that he's blocking more and people start to panic, but I still see him doing better at the Saints than he does at the Seahawks.
Now, speaking of Gronk, yes, we do know that Brady's going to be out the first 4 games. Jimmy Garoppolo, well, as of right now, we still don't know what's going to happen in the courts. If it were to still stay, we all know that Jimmy Garoppolo is going to quarterback the first 4 games. Looking at what he's done the first couple of games during preseason, a lot of people are saying he's not ready. Me personally, I don't think they're showing the whole playbook yet. I think he'll be ready by the time the season comes around if he has to start the first 4 games. Do you think Gronk is going to be leaned on a lot more, especially with Garoppolo at the helm the first 4 games? And do you think Gronk is going to be that bailout that is going to be needed for such a time like this?
I do think that they're going to heavily target Gronk, look to Gronk, but on the flip side, I think without having Tom Brady under center, defenses for the most part can focus all of their attention on Rob Gronkowski. And I could see Jimmy Garoppolo, who doesn't have a ton of experience, maybe forcing a few passes that he shouldn't be.
Now, last year, Gronk, started slow because he was coming back off that devastating injury, and as the year went on, became the most dominant tight end in football. I see that happening again this year. People seem to forget that Gronk is only going to be 25, 26 years old. Although it seems like he's been playing football for quite some time now. That's what happens when, you get a little bit famous. But
oh, yeah.
I gotta say, do you think that this is the year that Gronk possibly breaks the 100 catch barrier? And if so, do you see 100 catches, possibly around 1,400 yards, and definitely in double digits in touchdowns?
I don't necessarily. I don't see the 100 catches. I mean, the double-digit touchdowns, I could certainly see that for sure. See the 100 catches, and again, I think that could have something to do with his quarterback not being there the first 4 weeks. I love Gronk. He's a man in his own right when it comes to that position. I just kind of fear that sort of the preseason hype and value that everybody was giving Jimmy Graham, to see Gronk go in the first round this year, it just scares me a little bit that if he doesn't sort of repeat or do better than what he did last season, he could be considered a bit of a bust. I'm not so sure that he's going to finish as the top tight end this season.
Andrew, you have any questions for Jed?
I do. Thank you. One thing I look with tight ends is, as far as from a fantasy standpoint, is the hidden gem. The guy who's going to give me some production and make it worth my while. One guy that I've been high on for a while and it paid off last year was Delanie Walker. Had an outstanding season, over 800 yards, 4 touchdowns in Tennessee. With Marcus Mariota being looks like going to be the guy going forward, how do you see Delanie Walker's value in the fantasy world going? How do you see it working out?
I love his value. He is so cheap right now. He's going in very late rounds in NFL 10s, and I'm sure when redraft starts up in a couple weeks, he'll still be able to be had very cheaply. I mean, he's sort of underrated, the 900 yards last season. Could have got more touchdowns out of him, but he has a much better quarterback this season, and I think a veteran tight end can be a great thing for a rookie quarterback. He should get a lot of those bailout passes underneath, and, he's a big guy. I'd like to see his touchdowns go up.
There are, in tight end more than other positions, you see players who have a lot of talent but don't make it through the full season and the rigors of having to block and then receive and whatnot. And there's 2 guys that I'm looking at that one really underachieved and one has been made out of glass the last few years. Do you see any hope in Vernon Davis becoming respectable again in the realm of a fantasy player?
I do. I mean, he's getting up there in age, but I really think that offense, it's really Anquan Boldin for me and kind of Vernon Davis. I'm not a very big believer in Torrey Smith. And, Vernon, again, I think a veteran tight end. These older tight ends can be really good for quarterbacks. But he's got to score more touchdowns. And I think he certainly has the ability and the upside to return to, the Vernon Davis of previous seasons.
Yeah, I just from my own experience watching, he was a bit of a clubhouse problem. So hopefully he rights that ship a little bit. Next question. Go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, it's amazing when you can see how things in the locker room sort of spill onto the field in terms of production.
Oh, absolutely. Next question, and I'm talking about a player that has shown that he's got the talent to be legit, but hasn't been able to stay on the field long enough. Changed teams during the offseason. Jordan Cameron going from Cleveland to Miami. Do you see Cameron getting back to that upper echelon? I mean, a couple years ago, he was one of the can't-miss tight ends, and now he kind of looks like an afterthought. Do you think he'll make his way back up?
I can't say that I do. The beating that his head has taken and the time that he's missed, I just feel like he's one shot away from sort of being done. Ever since that one season where I guess it was 2013, he just really hasn't really produced much, I guess you could say. I like him in Miami. I love Tannehill as a quarterback, but the injury, and I'm not usually one to rely on injury history too much, but when it comes to the head, dangerously close to missing too much time.
Yeah, and being a guy from Cleveland, I always watched him very carefully, and I totally agree with you. The beating he's taken has been absolutely brutal. Another player, and it's a going trend with tight ends. Another player who missed a significant amount of time, but we've seen him have the talent to be outstanding. Kyle Rudolph from Minnesota. And I bring him up because Nick drools over the Minnesota Vikings. He worships the idol of Adrian Peterson. Do you see Kyle Rudolph? I believe it was a torn groin or something like that last year. Do you see him getting back into a respectable swing of things with Bridgewater getting a little more comfortable as quarterback, or has he lost too much time?
No, I do. I'm definitely in the Rudolph camp this season. I love him this year. I love him with Teddy. I think Adrian Peterson coming back is good for his value. I think it's just going to elevate the entire offense. I know every year everyone says this is his year. He's going to have his big breakout again, and he's finally healthy. But it appears he is finally healthy, and I for one love his value. I mean, he's cheap. If you're not going to get a top tight end, he's certainly a great late-round target for me.
All right, next one, because we're on a roll. Is Coby Fleener legit? Is he part of the elite, or is he a pretender?
I think he is, and I think his quarterback has a lot to do with that, and I think his quarterback had a lot to do with that in college. The problem with Coby Fleener is Dwayne Allen he just won't go away. And, he tends to have tan hands sometimes and kind of drops the ball, which is a pet peeve, obviously, but I do think he's the real deal, and I think if you put him on another offense, maybe not, but certainly in Indianapolis.
All right, so you've had your fantasy draft last week. You have Niles Paul on your roster. If you had a do-over with the same level, the same pick, who would have you taken instead?
I would have to say Michael Rivera from Oakland. I think he's another guy. He had quietly a nice little season for himself last year. And ever since Walford was drafted, people seem to have written him off as if he's not there anymore. And I find him go undrafted. I find him in the late rounds. And I think actually he'll better his season from last year.
All right, I got a couple more before I send it back to Nick.
Sure.
Do you think with Brandon Marshall leaving Chicago that Martellus Bennett's role is going to be expanded? He averaged, 57 yards a game, which is for a tight end, that's not bad at all. That's pretty good. Just under 1,000 yards receiving for the season. Do you see his role being expanded with Marshall being out, or do you think another receiver will just kind of claw his way in?
It will be expanded. if nothing else by default. Jay Cutler is going to have to throw the big bodies in the end zone. I feel like it's almost what he's used to. And yet, you said Alshon on one side and Brandon Marshall on the other. And then this season we thought it would be Alshon and Kevin White, but now we're not sure if he's even going to suit up. And I think Martellus Bennett is going to be your next look in the end zone. Eddie Royal's going to come in. He's going to get his targets, but I think I think Martellus Bennett is a tight end who has the ability and the upside to put up pretty much receiver numbers.
All right, last.
Go up.
Go ahead. Sorry. Last question before I send it back to Nick. Julius Thomas goes from Denver to Jacksonville. Obviously, he's out with a broken hand. Should be supposedly back by season opener. How much value has he lost from being in Denver to being in Jacksonville? And do you think his presence in the middle with an improving Blake Bortles is going to deliver enough production to make him worth putting on your team?
Not for me. I mean, this might sound extreme, but his value has gone from very high to, in my eyes, non-existent. I want nothing to do with him for the most part. I think he went from an incredible offense to a bad offense, and I think we're going to see this year if he's the supreme athlete that he is, or if he just had a Hall of Fame quarterback thrown to him.
Perfect. Thank you. Nick, back to you.
Sure.
Well, Jen, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Greatly appreciated having you on. Why don't you let the good people know where they can find you on social media and tell them about all the websites outside of Blindside Football that you write for?
Sure. Well, naturally, you can find me on Twitter, FF Degenerate with a J. Said it earlier. I take no offense to it. I fully claim my degenerate status. Trying to write I try to write where I can. Right now it's Blindside Fantasy Pros. I have some content on the DraftKings playbook. And also, Gridiron Experts too, I'm sorry. And, for the next week, you can find me in the NFL 10 draft lobby. I've been very busy in there trying to squeeze in as many more as I can before the season starts. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Thank you so much, Jen, for joining us this evening, and good luck to you during the fantasy football season, and hope to have you on in the not-too-distant future.
Sure, anytime. I really appreciate you having me on. I listened to the show earlier tonight, and, it's a tough act to follow, all the ladies you had on tonight.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Have a good one.
Thank you, you too.
And that was Jen Ryan from Blindside Football. I got to tell you, this was one hell of a show when you have the ladies of fantasy football and when you have Ali Fontana, Renee Miller, Jessica Kleinschmidt, Liz Loza, and Jen Ryan all on the same show. It's just going to be radio gold. Ain't that right, Drew?
Absolutely. We haven't forgotten. We've been making it a priority. We've had a whole litany of female football fanatics on our show over the course of time. So many people don't realize that it doesn't matter your gender. If you've got the skills and the knowledge, you drop it. You present it, you put it out there, and you get your kudos. You get brought on the shows. Hey, football does not have to be a man-only sport, and we've proven that it's not. It's a female-friendly sport, too, if you love sports. And these ladies who came on dropped a lot of knowledge, a lot of experience, and to show that fantasy football, even more so than regular, just watching the football game, fantasy football is not a man-only, activity. It's for everybody. And if you're a lady out there and you've thought about fantasy football, but you're afraid of getting involved, you know what? Get involved, because these ladies have shown that there is a lot of real knowledge, even in the female in the female gender. It doesn't matter who has it. They're throwing it down. They're giving it to everyone, and it's just an outstanding reality that we all can come together as fans, not guys, not girls, nothing, but as fans of the game and just have a good time in the world of fantasy sports and watching real football at that. It's a great reality that we're living in, Nick.
Exactly. And I couldn't have been so proud of having each of these lovely ladies on. And you said it best. They dropped the knowledge. They were very precise in all their points that were being made. And there was nothing being held back. And that's the best part about it. They state their opinions, they stand by it, and there's a reason why they work for ESPN. There's a reason why they work for FanDuel. There's a reason why they work for Scout.com and Yahoo. There's a reason why they work for Blindside Football, Gridiron Experts, and DraftKings. I mean, there's a reason why they are where they are today. And I, for one, have always been one of those champions that say, it's not a male-dominated world anymore. It's, trending more towards equality. But in certain aspects of fantasy football, you see a lot of females out there dominating and destroying the competition one by one. And it's great. It really is. It's absolutely awesome. We got a couple minutes left, and we're going to go into overtime tonight, Drew.
Uh-oh.
And the reason why is because I've been keeping something since Wednesday that I need to get out. And before I do that, I just want to say to everybody, thank you for allowing us once again to come into your homes to listen to this special tonight, the Ladies of Fantasy Football. Special thanks again to Allie Fontana, Renee Miller, Jessica Kleinschmidt, Liz Loza, and Jen Ryan for coming on and spending their Saturday nights with us. Obviously, we will have them back at some point during the football season. That's pretty much a guarantee. And if I happen to be going through what I'm saying right now, if I do get cut off live, don't worry about it. You can listen to us on the podcast, which will be available starting tomorrow. But now I got to get this off my chest. On Wednesday, the Pro Football Hall of Fame Senior Committee had their vote to see who will be placed on the ballot for 2016 as part of the senior vote. They came out and decided to nominate the late Ken Stabler and the late Jim Stample for the senior nominations for the 2016 Pro Football Hall of Fame ballot. I give kudos to the late Ken Stabler. I give kudos to the late Jim Stample for being put on the ballot. But an egregious error, once again, was made by the Pro Football Hall of Fame. I'd like for someone to please explain to me how in the goddamn hell that Jerry Kramer is not put up for nomination for the 2016 Hall of Fame, or how he's not in the Hall of Fame, period. This has been an ongoing stick in my craw for many, many years. Now, I cannot say that I've watched Jerry Kramer play. I'm pretty young, but I've seen NFL films. And it is disgusting that he continuously gets looked over time and time again, whether it's by the original committee, whether it's by the senior committee, whether it's by whatever committee that the Pro Football Hall of Fame throws together. You're talking about a guy that is part of the 75th anniversary All-NFL team. He's the only guy from the 75th NFL anniversary team not to be in the Hall of Fame. He is a Packers legend. He happens to be the only one in the Ring of Fame right now that is not in the Hall of Fame. This is a guy who was the first real pulling guard for Vince Lombardi's ever-famous power sweep in which he helped make Jimmy Taylor a Hall of Famer. He played next to Forrest Gregg, who is a Hall of Famer. He was the reason why in the Ice Bowl in the 1960s that Bart Starr, it was his block that springed that 2-yard touchdown for that game. This is a guy who year in, year out was an all-pro. This is a guy who left his blood, his sweat, his tears, everything on the football field. And yet time and time again, he is not up for induction into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. I don't know who he pissed off. I don't think he ever pissed anybody off. There's not a bad bone in Jerry Kramer's body. This is a guy who played the game the right way. This is the guy who was, bar none, whether by teammates or foes alike, one of the most respected, the greatest players of a generation. And yet, he still doesn't get nominated. Now, I know his daughters through Facebook, Alicia and Diana. They have the Jerry Kramer Full Hall of Fame Facebook page. There have been numerous letters written to the committee by Hall of Famers, by teammates, by senators, by whatever. And yet it seems it falls on deaf ears. For what reason? Why? If for the life of me, I cannot figure this out. When you have a player of that caliber still not in the Hall of Fame. Now, I know people are saying, well, you could say the same thing about Joe Flacco. You could say the same thing about Jack Tatum. You could say the same thing about Donnie Shell. You could say the same thing about L.C. Greenwood. Yeah, I could, but they don't have the resume of Jerry Kramer. Not in the very least, and will never have a resume like Jerry Kramer. And I'm telling you, and this may sound crass and disgusting and whatever, but honestly, right now, I don't care. The only way Jerry Kramer will ever be up for nomination is maybe if he were to pass away. And why would I say something like that? Well, look who just got nominated now, Ken Stabler and Jim Stanfield. Well, both of them happen to pass away this year. Is it a coincidence? I don't know. But here you have a living legend of the game, a guy who takes his time to this day to talk about his career and to talk about his teammates and to talk about his family. It gives his everything. And when the votes came out on Wednesday and his name was not mentioned as a senior nominee, it made me sick to my stomach. How much more time does he have to see himself go into the Hall of Fame? I don't know. I'm not one of those guys that it has a crystal ball that says when he will. But this has been one of the most egregious errors that any committee could ever make. Now, again, I don't know Jerry Kramer personally. I've never spoken to the guy. I've only spoken to his daughters in passing on Facebook. Lord knows I've tried to get him on my show, but his schedule is so busy that it's totally understandable why he can't. But if Alicia and Diana Kramer are listening to this show, you can better well know that I will continue to champion the cause that you guys have started for quite some time, because Jerry Kramer deserves to be a Pro Football Hall of Famer. The accolades are there. I don't know what they have against them. And to be honest with you, I think it's a crying shame. Now, normally I would go into my Travis Sham mockery, thing, and it is a Travis Sham mockery. But I'm not going to go into it like that, because It is a travesty. It is a sham. It is a mockery. It is disgusting. It is despicable how a guy that this nature, a legend, a complete legend, is still not there. You know, there comes a time where you have to wonder where the priorities are for certain committees. I'm calling out the Pro Football Hall of Fame committees right now. Right or wrong, the next time that there's a vote, and I think that's not until 2017, and I hope to God he's still alive, in 2017, if you don't vote Jerry Kramer into the Hall of Fame, I'm telling you right now, I'm done with you. You think this rant was bad? Wait for 2 years from now. I guarantee you it's going to be a lot worse, and I'm going to have expletive deleteds coming out of my mouth from here until kingdom come. My mic is now dropped. Take us home, Drew.
Well, Nick, I'll be honest. When you first mentioned going to overtime, I thought you were going to talk about what's going on at Baylor. But here's the truth. I want to give my little piece before we shut it down for the night, since we're in overtime already. I was never a big Ken Stabler fan. Yeah, he was a good quarterback, but he is in the same category as Joe Namath, a quarterback who threw more interceptions than touchdowns and has no business being in the national in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Namath doesn't deserve to be in the Football Hall of Fame. Neither does Stabler. Here's the reason why they both. Well, one is already in, and one's up for grabs. They went to Alabama, a sexy school. They played quarterback, a sexy position, and they won a championship, also very sexy. You know what's not sexy? Offensive lineman. But you know what? As one who played offensive line for a while, there is nothing more important on a football team than an offensive line. Without an offensive line, great quarterbacks become fair quarterbacks, good running backs become non-existent, and receivers never get the ball. Without an offensive line, nothing happens. And here's what makes Jerry Kramer even less sexy, and this is sad. He went to a small school, Idaho, in the 1950s. That's not sexy. It doesn't need to be. You're an offensive freaking lineman. There's nothing sexy about it. It's working in the trenches. But you know, he had a strong career. He's on the 50th anniversary team. He was been mentioned on NFL Network's top 10 as the number one player, not in the Hall of Fame. You would think if the NFL Network is practically promoting him to be put in the Hall of Fame, why isn't he? He played from 58 to 68, but he did miss a season in there due to illness, and still made 5 first-team All-Pros. That means you were the best, not one of the best, going to the Pro Bowl. You were the best at your craft. And he was a second-teamer in another year. 5-time NFL champion. Okay, so the Super Bowl didn't start until later. Hey, I'm from Cleveland. I understand the value of NFL champion. NFL championship games. The only difference between that and the Super Bowl is who your opponent was. It's still championship of the NFL. Otto Graham, did 10 years and went to 10 championship games. He's in the Hall of Fame. You have Jerry Kramer, played 10 years, won 5 NFL championships. He won half of his career in championships, and that's ridiculous. You don't find that nowadays. You find anyone who wins 5 Super Bowls, guaranteed Hall of Famer. Look at the guys in New England who have won 4, guaranteed Hall of Famers in there. I don't understand this, Nick. I really don't. I have a feeling, much like Stabler, it's not going to start popping up until he's no longer with us, it's beyond a travesty, sham, and mockery. It's an insult to the history of the game. He's been eligible for a long time, and he's been on the list of finalists 10 different times and still never got in. I have to wonder with you, what on earth did he do to piss people off so much to not get into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. He's in the Packers one because he was one of the best of his craft. Why? I don't understand either, and I don't understand why there's such a bias against offensive linemen when it comes to the Hall of Fame. This is not new. This is a very long-standing issue. Gene Hickerson. Look how long it took Gene Hickerson to get into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And he's had a more storied career than even Kramer did, and it took him until after he was dead to get in the Hall of Fame. I mean, he played 15 years and pretty much did as much as Kramer did without the championships, and he finally got it. But the funny thing is, they played during the same time. They both were in the same rookie class. So if it takes someone dying to get in the Hall of Fame, perhaps we're not looking at this the right way. I really got nothing else on nothing more on that. The whole thing just kind of blows my mind.
I'm about to piss off a lot of Jet fans, and to be honest with you, I don't care.
Well, that Joe Namath doesn't deserve to be there? He doesn't.
Joe Namath does not deserve to be in the Hall of Fame just because he won one damn game. And yes, I know it's the most important game, one of the most important games in NFL history. But take away that one game, you look at his career. Is that a Hall of Fame career? No, not at all. Not even close. And you have other guys that are in the Hall of Fame that I'm like, meh. Are they really Hall of Famers? I mean, it just boggles my mind. I'm pretty much done with it. I'm done with my rant. All I know is that something better happen in 2 years, or else it's going to be a major, major, major issue. Because if he gets voted in after he passes away, I think I might go to Canton myself and burn the offices to the ground of each of the committee members. But that's just me. My name is Nick Ficarelli. I am the mad scientist of sports. You can find me on Twitter at @NAF_inscriber. Again, that's at @NAF_inscriber. And you can listen to us live here every Saturday night, 10 p.m. Eastern Time on the Inscriber Radio Network. Drew.
My name is Andrew Glukov. You can catch me on Twitter at StatBoyDrew. Next time, Nick, we'll try and make sure that he's a little more collected on this one. But I feel your pain, sir.
I don't think I would. I think I was actually very clear and concise. It's just been boiled for the last 3 days. I was trying to get on a couple of shows, and unfortunately it didn't happen. So I had to save all that pent-up frustration for tonight. And obviously I did not want to take anything away from the Ladies of Fantasy Football special. I figure I wait until after the special is over when we're off the air. So people will get this extra little bonus and everything like that. But alas, ladies and gentlemen, it is time for us to depart. Time to tone down the beacons. Time to erase the experiments off the chalkboard to get ready for some new ones, and time to bring in some new test subjects next week. That's right, we'll be back next week, 10 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 p.m. Pacific Time, right here live on the Inscriber Radio Network. Until then, ladies and gentlemen, the lab is now officially closed, and in the words of my good friend Kyle Nash, class is officially dismissed. Good night, ladies and gentlemen.